Congressman Buck, can you hear me?
Just yet.
I just heard you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, you heard me? Great. Okay.
Yeah. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Great. So we could hear you better when you were kind of pulled up. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but I think we should be good.
Okay. I will stay at this distance.
Great. And just let us know if for some reason you're having trouble hearing or anything. Go ahead, Mr. Gessler.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Representative Buck.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to ask you some questions, as you well know, but I'd like to start just a little bit with your current position and your background. So could you tell for the record your current position?
Yeah, I'm a United States Congressman for the 4th Congressional District of Colorado.
And how long have you been a congressman?
Almost 9 years, 8 years and 10 months.
Okay. And when were you first elected then into Congress?
I was elected in November of 2014.
Okay. And what did you do prior to that?
Before that, I was the elected district attorney in the 19th Judicial District, which is Bjorklund.
And how long did you serve in that position?
I served as district attorney for 10 years.
Okay. And then prior to being elected as district attorney, what did you do?
I actually worked for construction company in a non-legal position for 2.5 years, and before that I was with the U.S. Department of Justice for 15 years, 3 years in Washington, D.C., and 12 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Denver. And I also taught at the University of Denver Law School in the evenings, and I'm not sure if the title was adjunct professor, but it was something along those lines. I taught at the graduate law program, and I also taught for the law school criminal procedure.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I want to direct your attention to the events around January 6th and the electoral vote, the electoral count. Where were you in the afternoon of January 6th?
I was on the floor in the U.S. House.
Okay, and why were you there? What was going on?
There was a procedure to certify the votes from the November 2020 election.
Okay, and had you done that before as a congressman?
Yes. So I'm trying to think. For the 2016 election, I was not here for the 2012 election, so 2016, and that was my second time, 2020.
Okay. And can you describe what the process is that Congress follows for the electoral vote count?
Sure. So the Vice President presides, and he orders the envelopes to be opened, and the clerk in the House opens the envelopes. It's a joint hearing. The Senate is in the House chambers, and we have a joint hearing. The envelopes are open, and the electoral votes from each of the states in alphabetical order is announced.
Okay.
That's how it's supposed to work generally.
Okay. And what role does does Congress play? Are you merely bystanders to that? Bystanders, or does the Congress play a role in that process?
It depends who you ask. In my opinion, we have a very ministerial function of sitting there, opening envelopes. I assume that at the time the Constitution was written, it was meant to make sure that the votes were open in public, so that the public would have some assurance of the integrity of the votes being counted. But we are not counting votes, and we are not opening envelopes. We are sitting there.
Okay. And now, is there a process for objections?
There is a process for objections based on a statute passed around the time of the Civil War, where people would make objections. Again, my understanding is that the statute is there in case there is a dispute of electors certified electors coming from a state.
Okay. So I want to go back to January 6, 2017. Were there any objections on the floor at that time?
Yes, there were. There were 6 or 7 objections made to different states' electoral count.
And can you describe what happened?
I can. Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, Congressman from Massachusetts, stood up and objected to the votes. I think it was Alabama. And then there were 5 other objections, clear objections to particular votes. Then the last objection, the 7th one, Maxine Waters from California, I don't know if she objected, but she just asked if a senator will agree to object with her. So the only way a proper objection can be made is if a House member and a senator both object. And in 16 and in years past, frankly, there have never been, to my knowledge, a senator who has objected, at least in this century, no senator has objected with the House member in the, and in 16, in 17, January 6 of 17, no senator agreed to object.
So all the objections were from House members?
All the objections were from House members, and they were not heard because it wasn't properly made.
Okay. If a senator, just from a process standpoint, if a senator agrees to the objection, then what happens?
Then, this is based on memory, I have to have the rules by memory. The objection then is recognized, the Senate goes back to their chambers, the House, there's I think an hour of debate, a half hour from each side, and then there's a vote on whether the objection should stand or not, and then the Senate comes back and convenes with the House, and the next envelope is opened, and the process is continued.
Okay. Let's go to January 6, 2021. Were there, when you were on the House floor, were there any objections?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what happened?
And I know Paul Gosar objected to, he is from Arizona, Congressman from Arizona, he objected to the Arizona electoral count, and the Vice President asked if there was, Vice President Pence asked if there was a senator who agreed, and I believe it was Ted Cruz who agreed on that, and the objection was proper, and so the Senate then went back to their chambers to debate, and the House started the process of debating.
Okay. So were you in the House as part of that debate?
I was in the House. It was unclear to me whether I would be speaking or not. It was during COVID, and so the House had rules on how many seats had to be between each member when they're on the House. There were actually members in the gallery, so it was people were very spread out. But my guess is there were only probably about half the members were actually in the House, on the House floor at the time. Most members were back in their offices.
Okay.
Or at least, maybe not most, but a large number of members were back in their offices.
Okay. And did anything unusual happen that day?
Oh, yeah. It was unusual.
I'm trying to give you open-ended questions. Can you describe what happened?
Sure. We're permitted to have phones on the House floor. I was not getting a signal, so I didn't know what was going on outside the House floor. But the first thing that I knew, a police officer, uniformed officer, actually no, I think the first thing that happened was a security detail escorted Speaker Pelosi off of the dais, and she was escorted out. And then, of course, everybody's murmuring about what happened. And then it may have been Jim McGovern who took over, but a Democrat member of the majority took over and was acting Speaker at that point. A few minutes later, a police officer came to the microphone and said that tear gas had been dispersed, and we were advised that there were tear gas or gas masks, I guess, under our seats, and we should deploy those gas tanks. Which seems a little odd because we continued to have the debate. She may have also said that the Capitol had been breached. I'm not sure if she said that, but there was clear indication that there was a danger at that point. I can remember within seconds of that happening, a member from the Democrat side up in the balcony area, the gallery, yelled out, "This is your fault." And I'm sitting there without any context for what's going on, and I don't have anything, a text from my staff or the ability to go online and figure out what was going on.
Okay. And then, so were you actually debating while wearing gas masks?
No, I don't think anybody put their gas mask on, and at that time it was more of milling around and trying to figure out, what the threat was and what would happen next.
Okay. And then, did the Capitol Police or security respond in any way to a perceived threat?
Yes. So after that, and after a few minutes of that, maybe longer, maybe 10, 20 minutes, the police officer came back to the podium and said that we would be clearing the House floor. And that's when I saw officers, both uniform and plainclothes, take positions. I sit typically, and within that day I was sitting near the center aisle, and for some context for the court, that's the aisle where the president walks down to give the State of the Union address, and it typically divides the two parties, but I was sitting close to the aisle, and that center door there are big wood doors on the outside, but then the doors on the inside, there is glass above the door on the inside.
Okay. And so what did the security police do? Or were they security or police? How should I describe them?
They are sworn officers.
Okay. And so what did they do?
Well, they took up positions, and as members started leaving, I actually took my coat off. There were some, my jacket off. There were some members who were moving furniture over to block the door, and the officers, I know at one point had drawn their weapons. My memory also is after the members had moved some furniture over, there was a popping sound, and it was the glass over the door, and someone had popped that glass, and that's when the officers drew their weapons. It's hard in a room like that. It's hard to tell exactly what that noise came from. I could see the glass, and so I knew, but it almost sounded like a bullet at first, and so. The officers had drawn their guns and were securing that door.
Okay. Now, did you personally feel threatened? How did you feel perceive what was going on?
Well, I felt kind of stupid afterwards because at the time I took my jacket off and I was there to help police officers. I had no idea whether there were 10 people in the building or 1,000 people in the building. So when we started when the police started clearing the building, and at the same time there were police officers behind the wall of the front wall of the House chambers. There were police officers who were clearly milling around and securing the other entrances to the House, and I could see that from my seat. When we started to clear, I put my jacket back on. I was one of the last to leave the House floor, and the officers actually came over to me. I was down in the middle aisle at this point, and they said, "It's time to go." Nobody was, yelling or screaming, but it was clear that it was a very serious situation.
Okay. And what was your view of the sort of capabilities of the Metro Police and I'm sorry, of the security officers?
With the Capitol Police, there were probably 6, 7 of them that were there at that one door, and it appeared to me with their weapons and an unknown threat to me at that point that they were in control of the House floor based on the number of officers, probably 30 to 40 officers around the House, well-armed officers.
Okay. And what was your perception as to, well, let me ask you this. Was anyone that you saw shot?
No. In fact, I didn't even hear the shot, but the shot would have occurred while I was there, because, like I said, I was one of the last to leave the House floor, but I understood later that a lady had tried to breach the House chambers through the Speaker's lobby, coming in over the door, and she was shot.
Okay. So from your perspective, the way the security officers were operating, what did they, were you able to infer any sense of what their protocols or based on their behavior?
Yeah, I think based on my experience in law enforcement and what I saw them doing, their goal, their function was to make sure that there wasn't a hostage situation, to make sure that no members were going to be hurt or taken by whatever the bomb was. Obviously, they have earpieces in; they're aware of what's going on. But they were there to secure the floor until the members left, and as soon as the members left, I could see the officers leaving the house at that point.
Okay.
Leaving the house floor.
And why do you think they left the House floor?
Because I don't think I think the threat that they were, and again, this is speculating, but the threat that they were there to minimize was the threat of injury to members and staff, and once that had been accomplished, they were withdrawn.
Okay. Are you aware of any sort of breaches or occupations of the Capitol prior to this event?
During the summer of 2020, there were riots, and the rioters had attempted to break through the barricades, and in some cases have broken through the barricades. Much smaller groups of people, but clearly they were, protesting, and the goal was to breach the Capitol at that point. There was also an instance in 2016, I believe it was June of 2016, where there was a mass shooting, and I don't remember which one. It may have been a school shooting. The Democrats wanted, the Republicans were in the majority, the Democrats wanted to have gun control bills heard. Speaker Ryan refused to bring those to the floor, and the Democrats occupied the floor at that time. The Speaker ordered that the C-SPAN coverage of the floor end, and the Democrats began to live stream from their phones. There was some, it wasn't really a fight, but there was certainly some intimidation, some pushing and shoving around whether the Democrats would control the Republican side of that, of the chamber. We had a couple, or at least one Navy SEAL, a couple of veterans who ended that pretty quickly when they went over to the microphones, and so the Dems stayed on their side to engage in that protest.
Was the House able to continue its duties that day?
No, it was shut down.
Okay. Let me ask you if you're aware of how the police reacted when there were outsiders who came into the Capitol. I think you had testified in 2020.
Yeah, I don't think they ever breached the Capitol. Protesters were typically protesting in the evenings around the Capitol. The barricades, and they're fairly weak barricades that were set up to kind of they look almost like something that you put your bicycle in a rec department or something. They weren't very sturdy barricades, but some of the protesters may have breached that particular perimeter, but to my knowledge, they never got into the Capitol.
Okay. Okay. Let me turn your attention to after the events of January 6th. So are you aware of the January 6th Select Committee that was that ultimately conducted a form of an investigation into the events of January 6th?
Objection. This is beyond the scope of what the Congressman was provided for. Specifically, he was provided to testify about his experience as a sitting member of Congress at the Capitol on January 6th, 2021.
Your Honor, I think we had verbally as well told the court that we'd have two congressmen, obviously one we can't, who were going to testify about congressional procedures, including the January 6th committee. That's an event here, and you've specifically asked for evidence about the January 6th committee. That's why Mr. Hafey is going to be testifying, even though he was not placed on the petitioner's witness list. And so that's in response to that as well.
We have two options here. We can either take Mr. Neal's declaration, and I can put that into evidence, which would then deprive the petitioners a chance to cross, or we can allow Mr. Buck to testify about something that wasn't disclosed, and you can cross-examine, which is your preference.
If I could have just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure. Just one moment, Congressman Buck.
Judge, I don't have a preference if you were asking me the question.
I wasn't, but I'm assuming that you're willing to testify about this additional subject.
Of course.
Your Honor, I think we're fine if the Congressman wants to testify about that, as long as we're able to ask him about post-January 6th events as well.
Well, I'm not sure what post-January 6th.
Well, they would probably revolve around reference to January 6th. As long as we have some leeway in asking any questions.
It's hard for me to rule on giving you legal lit. I have no idea what that will be, but let's proceed with this testimony and play by ear.
And just so you know, our position, Your Honor, we're going to ask Representative Buck about the January 6th committee and its processes, and we certainly agree that's fair game for cross-examination. But any events after January 6th that ever reference January 6th, we'll probably object if it goes beyond the scope of our direct, certainly, Your Honor.
Well, I'm just going to rule as the objections come.
Fair enough, Your Honor.
In that case, we'll do something else, declaration instead.
I'm sorry, we would accept.
We would accept Congressman Nell's declaration instead.
We're gonna let's hear what Congressman Buck has to say. You're going to get a fair chance to cross-examine.
Representative Buck,
Before we move on to that, I'd like to ask just one question about his prior testimony.
Sure, Your Honor.
So, Congressman Buck, did you see when you were in the chambers and you said that the police officers are all putting up barricades, etc., and could you see what was going on in the hallway, or are you kind of just in a vacuum at this point, in the sense that you see them seeming to prepare for something but don't know what's going on outside the room?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier, I felt kind of stupid taking my jacket off and getting ready for a fight, because I didn't realize until I got back. Actually, we were moved to a committee room after we were brought off the floor. I had young staff, and I was concerned about them. And so I came back to my office rather than the secure committee room, and I saw on TV what was going on, and I thought, oh my goodness, that there are a lot of people out there.
Thank you.
Congressman Buck, if I may ask you, how did you get from the Capitol back to your office?
There's a series of tunnels underneath the Capitol building that connect the House offices, the Senate offices, the Library of Congress, all connected with a series of tunnels, and that's how police escorted us through those tunnels.
Okay, thank you. So, so let's turn to the January 6th committee. To your knowledge, how are members of committees through the normal process chosen?
So what happens is, I can give the January 6th as an example, but the speaker announces that there will be a January 6th committee. There will be X number of Democrats. I don't know if it was 8 or 9 Democrats on the committee. There will be, I think she said 5 Republicans on the committee. And at that point, she started naming the Democrats within, a week or 10 days. She started naming the Democrats for the committee, and the Republican leader at the time, we were in the minority at the time, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, named 5 Republicans. I know 3 of the names, Jim Jordan, Jim Banks, and Kelly Armstrong were named to that committee. Speaker Pelosi then denied Jim Jordan and Jim Banks and said they would not be seated on the committee. And at that point, the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, withdrew all 5 names and refused to have anybody from the Republican Party sit on the committee. The next move, Speaker Pelosi announced that Liz Cheney would co-chair the committee. Obviously, Liz Cheney, a Republican, would co-chair the committee. And within a couple of weeks after that, Adam Kinzinger then was named to the committee by Speaker Pelosi. So there were this group of Democrats, 7, 8, 9, and 2 Republicans who were seated on the committee.
Okay. And do you know Representatives Cheney or Kinzinger?
I know them both very well.
Okay. And your thoughts of them?
Well, my thoughts in terms of the January 6th.
Let me ask you this: what's your relationship with them? When you say you know them, if you have a relationship with them.
Well, I've had a long relationship with Liz Cheney. I worked for Dick Cheney on the Grand Contra investigation back in 1986 and 87. I knew Liz before she ran for Congress from Wyoming, and was in contact with her pretty consistently as she served here in Congress. Adam less so. I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, so we saw each other during the committee work and had some conversation, but he was not a particularly close friend or colleague.
Okay. So they were appointed to the January 6th committee. To your knowledge, what were their views towards the January 6th events when they were on the committee?
So after January 6th, Speaker Pelosi, understand the time frame. We've got January 6th, and then January 20th is the inauguration of the new president. Between January 6th and January 20th, Speaker Pelosi announced a impeachment proceeding against President Trump, and there was actually a vote on the floor. Both Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger voted for impeaching President Trump. I think of the 200 some odd Republicans, maybe 10, 12 voted for impeachment. So it was a fairly small minority, 5% of the overall conference voted for impeachment, and they were 2 of the Republicans who voted for impeachment.
Okay. Let me go back to Liz Cheney. Do you, you talked about contact. Do you consider her a friend, or how would you describe that?
Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in D.C., get a dog. I think that Liz and I were, acquaintances, and we, shared stories on occasion. I've never been to her house to eat. She's never been to my house. We haven't seen much of each other, but certainly had a friendly history together.
Okay. So she and Adam Kinzinger were on the floor. Based on the vote for impeachment, or as well as any other knowledge you have, did they represent the opinions of the large majority of the caucus?
On what subject?
With respect to the events of January 6th.
Well, I don't think they represented the views of most of the Republican Congress, because most of the Republican Congress, 95% of the Republican Congress, did not vote for the impeachment of President Trump, and they did. So in the sense of where they were on January 6th, I think they stood out.
Were there other Republicans then who had different perspectives or viewpoints than Representatives Cheney or Kinzinger that did not serve on the committee?
Well, the five Republicans who Leader McCarthy assigned to the committee did not serve on the committee and did not share the views of Liz Cheney or Andrew Kinzinger.
Okay. I'm going to represent to you that Representative Swalwell testified earlier, and that there was a text from him referring to Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger, in which he was saying that Representative Cheney and Kinzinger, he was happy that they were on the Democrats' team with respect to January 6th committee. Is that an accurate description from your point of view?
You know, I would have a tough time answering that question. They were clearly they shared the view on impeachment of President Trump for the actions that occurred on January 6th. I would say that when it came to most of the votes that were before the House, they did not share the views of the Democrats and how they voted on other subjects, but clearly on the January 6th issue, they had similar views. I don't know. You know, I don't think any Democrat wants to be known as being on the Republican team or the other way around.
Okay. Okay. And did you perceive any problems? Well, let me ask you this. Were there any other Republicans that served on the January 6th committee besides Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger?
No. I actually called Kevin McCarthy because of my background as a prosecutor, and I asked Kevin if I could get his permission to seek to serve on that committee, because I thought it was important that witnesses were cross-examined and documents were challenged. And Kevin told me that he did not want me serving on that committee, and he didn't want anybody else, any other Republican serving.
Why was it important for witnesses to be cross-examined and documents to be challenged?
Well, you know, in my experience as a prosecutor, if a defense attorney isn't present and a defendant isn't present, it's not a real fair trial. And in this case, you need to have both sides, you need to have the adversarial system working in order to get accurate and full, complete information for an issue like the January 6th investigation.
Did you think that Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger would sort of fulfill that role of, that role of ensuring that the adversarial process was carried out?
I think they both do their best to be fair, but I do think that they were more aligned with the result that the Democrats were looking for than, for example, Jim Bjorklund or Jim Banks or Kelly Armstrong would have done. So I think that it was not as adversarial and it was not as challenging for the evidence as it would have been if the 5 members appointed by Leader McCarthy or others in the conference were allowed to sit on that committee.
Do you think you would have fulfilled that role had you been on the committee?
I would have done my best. I think that it would take more than one person because there were so many documents, so much evidence that was considered. But certainly, I would have done my best. I worked, as I mentioned before, for Dick Cheney on the Iran-Contra investigation. We had a adversarial system, and we had a minority report on the Iran-Contra investigation on areas where we didn't agree. There is no minority report in this in the January 6th investigation because there was no minority. It was one viewpoint that was shared.
So when, well, let me ask you that. So Speaker Pelosi, when she rejected or refused to allow certain appointments by Representative McCarthy, in your experience in Congress, was that a normal event?
It was not normal in the history of Congress. Speaker Pelosi, on one or two other occasions, had removed members from committees. I know that Marjorie Taylor Greene was not allowed to sit on committees because of statements that she made before winning her seat for Congress, and I know that Paul Gosar was removed from committees. In the past, it's typically been the party of the person who is alleged to have committed some wrongdoing that removes the person from committee seats. And I'm not sure in relation to January 6th whether those events occurred before or after, but the typical process is for the minority party to be able to assign individuals, members to the committee assignments.
Okay. So you said it's never happened in the history of Congress. Did I hear you correct there?
Well, I have not.
To your knowledge.
To my knowledge, and certainly in recent history, it has not.
Okay. So observing the January 6th committee procedures, was in fact the evidence that was submitted to the committee subjected to the adversarial process?
No.
And why is that? If you could give me a little bit more of a description rather than a two-letter word no.
Why don't you start with how you know that?
How do I know there wasn't? Well, I had the opportunity to observe some of the hearings. I had the opportunity to read parts of the report, and I've had the opportunity to talk to some of the people who were alleged to have done things in the report and heard their side of the story, and they were never questioned. For example, Bjorklund was up for the speakership recently, and I went through with him some of the allegations in the January 6th report and then heard his side of the story. Those were not included in the January 6th report. And based on the makeup of the committee, there wasn't inquiries that I certainly would have wanted to make. For example, what was Speaker Pelosi's role in not having the National Guard present, or at least assembled to be present, and what was the Sergeant of Arms role in that? There are some areas that I think would have been important to look at to be able to judge President Trump's actions and non-actions in this case.
Do you know if there were any members on the committee who subpoenaed or produced evidence for witnesses that were supportive or sympathetic to the proposition that January 6th was not an insurrection and was not caused by President Trump?
Well, I'm aware that Leader McCarthy, when he made the statement that we would not be assigning Republicans to the January 6th committee after Speaker Pelosi had denied the assignments to Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, Leader McCarthy said that he was going to have a separate investigation, and that investigation would be our side of the story. And there were some witnesses who testified, and there were some documents produced, not through subpoena, but produced. And had those been part of the January 6th report, I think the report would have been more complete.
I'm sorry, the report would have been more
Complete.
Okay. Is it fair to say it would have been more balanced?
I think if you're looking for balance, yes, I think it would have would have presented both sides.
Okay. Let me ask you about that separate committee real quick. Did that committee have any subpoena power?
It did not.
Did it have any ability to compel the production of documents
It did not.
or witnesses?
No.
Okay.
You're talking about the January 6th committee?
No, Your Honor. I'm talking about the separate report that Representative Buck referred to that Speaker McCarthy had created. Let me just clear up the record, Representative Buck.
Let me correct you. It's not Speaker McCarthy at the time.
I'm sorry.
Speaker McCarthy.
Yes, Leader. I just want to help clear up the record a little bit. So your testimony was that Minority Leader McCarthy had sort of established a separate committee, correct?
Well, I wouldn't call it a committee because there were no Democrats on his effort, just as there were, well, I shouldn't say no Republicans. There were no Democrats on his effort. There were, I think, Jim Banks and a few others, Kelly Armstrong, were on this other group that was formed to investigate.
Okay. Let me go back to the January 6th committee. You said there was no minority report produced by the January 6th committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that important?
Oh, because it provides the other side of the story. It provides a context for what one side is alleging, and it is important to have I believe, the full picture in a situation like the January 6th investigation.
Okay. You had said when you spoke with Representative Jordan that there were things that he said that were either much different or provided a much different context than what appeared in the January 6th report. Can you explain that in a little more detail?
Sure.
Your Honor, we're not introducing anything for the truth of the matter asserted. We're introducing information that shows the January 6th committee had one perspective, and that the perspective that Representative Jordan provided was much different. So we're using this to demonstrate the incompleteness and one-sidedness, not that one side is true versus the other. I know we have other arguments about that, but I'm not looking to get the contents of either side. It's the difference between the two that matters.
Your Honor, the Congressman has already testified to the difference. We don't need to get into what Jim Jordan said.
Well, he said that, if I recall, he said that Jim Jordan had a different perspective on something, and we've heard the details of what it is. So, Congressman Buck, you can tell, if you wouldn't mind just telling the court what type of disputes Mr. Jordan had, rather than just repeating what Mr. Jordan said.
Sure. One example would be the report stated that Jim Jordan refused to testify. Jim's statement was that he received a subpoena and then were in the process of negotiating a date for his testimony, and then the committee staff never got back to his staff. So he says he was willing to testify. The report says that he was unwilling to testify. There were a few issues like that. He sent a tweet. He sent a text to Mark Meadows. I believe it was January 2nd, and in the text, the allegation in the report is that Jim Jordan advocated for the decertification, and Jim's statement to me was that he attached a law review article or a legal analysis, I guess it wasn't a law review article, legal analysis to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, to examine in terms of whether they could. So he says he wasn't advocating, but he was providing information to the White House on that subject.
So,
My objection, hearsay and move to strike. But then he said, Jim Jordan says this, Jim Jordan says that.
I accept the testimony just for the limited purpose of that there were things that maybe Mr. Jordan would have liked to have told the House committee that he wasn't able to.
Thank you, Yana. Representative Buck, let me ask you, why do you know so much detail, or why were you so interested in discrepancies between the committee report and why did you spend so much time learning about that from Representative Jordan?
Jim Jordan was a candidate for Speaker. He was actually the Speaker nominee for the Republican Party in the recent Speaker issue that was going on in the last few weeks.
Okay. And so it's fair to say you spoke with him at length about these issues as part of that process?
He came to my office one evening in the middle of his time as Speaker nominee, and we sat down for about an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay. To your knowledge, were any of the witnesses before the January 6th committee cross-examined?
I don't know that the concept of cross-examination is really part of what the committee process is. There are questions from Republicans, questions from Democrats, typically in a committee process. It is not as clear as a courtroom that one side is cross-examined.
Okay. To your in your view, and based on your observations attending the committee meetings, were questions placed to witnesses that were an effort or seeking to elicit testimony that ran contrary to the thesis that President Trump caused an insurrection?
No objection, because the suggestions characterized as Congressman Buck attending the committee. I don't believe Congressman Buck is on the committee.
Congressman Buck, when you talked about attending hearings, were you referring to the public hearings?
I didn't attend. I saw some public hearings on television, but I was not in attendance person.
So is that what you were questioning about?
His observations, yes.
You can answer.
Could you restate the question? I'm sorry.
I don't know if I can. I will try, though.
And maybe if you could do it a little less
I'm sorry, a little less
leading.
leading. Yes, Your Honor. Congressman Buck, from your observations of the committee process, do you think there were, can you describe whether the questions that were asked, whether they were postured and how they were postured to arrive at a full investigation?
Sure. I think that the questions were typically questions that would demonstrate President Trump's involvement and culpability in January 6th, or elicit answers that would demonstrate his involvement and culpability in the events of January 6th. As an old trial lawyer, I listened to a lot of those questions, and probably as most trial lawyers thought I was Clarence Darrow and I could have asked a better question, or I could have made an objection on hearsay or something at the time. So I tended not to watch a whole lot of what happened, because it didn't seem to me that the process was set up in a way that would sort of elicit the whole truth in those hearings.
Are you aware of any allegations that the committee altered evidence or altered exhibits that it received and then produced to the public?
I have heard of those allegations. I have not seen the documents and could not give you a judgment on whether I think those were accurate allegations or not.
Okay.
Remember, this is the world of politics, and truth is not closely aligned with political views.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. When you say this is a world of politics, do you think that the meets the description you just described about the relationship of politics and truth?
Sure. The purpose of that report was, there was a political purpose to that report, as there is with almost everything in Congress. And the political purpose was ultimately to win elections and to paint the one side in as bad a light as possible. And that's why typically there is a minority report in an investigation like this, so that both sides can say that this is really what happened. Here are the documents, here are the phone calls, and here's the testimony that supports it.
And it's your view that that did not happen in this case?
It's my view that the people who would have been most challenging to the evidence and testimony were not seated either by Speaker Pelosi or Speaker McCarthy ultimately on the committee.
Okay. With respect to the January 6th report, have you, what's your view on it from a political standpoint in Congress?
Well, I voted to certify the election. I thought what happened on January 6th was obviously bad. It was a riot in the Capitol building. It was meant to disturb a proceeding, and I felt that the parts of the report that I saw described those things. It went beyond that in other areas, and that's where I think the cross-examination in terms of the president's culpability would have been important.
And with the deficiency, and why do you think it would have been important?
Because I think that in order to be able to judge someone's culpability, it's like going into a courtroom as a prosecutor and not having a defense counsel or defendant. I think in order to be able to judge someone's culpability, you've got to be able to hear both sides of the story. And in this case, there was not another side. There were people who voted to impeach the president because they made a judgment that he had been involved in the January 6th events, and the other side was not present for one reason or another, was not present to be able to portray the other side of the story.
Thank you very much, Congressman Buck. I appreciate your testimony today. I have no further questions.
Short break just to discuss some issues. Obviously, this would be beyond the scope of what we originally prepared for. We'll provide 10 minutes.
Sure, given I think we're ahead of schedule generally, let's just take a 15-minute break before cross-examination. Does that work for you, Congressman Buck?
The bells are going to go off soon for voting, but I certainly will be available after votes, but hopefully votes are delayed, and I will do my very best to be.
Why don't we make it 10 minutes then, so we can hope to get you done, but we'll work with your schedule, okay?
Thank you very much.
So we'll reconvene at 5 after 2.
All rise.
You may be seated. Do you know if Congressman Buck is still good, or is he going to vote? Oh, there he is. Are you still able to testify?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Your Honor, before we begin, and I want to get this right, to try to make sure we have a full, fair, and accurate process, I would like to actually ask that we can split our cross-examination. We had one attorney preparing to ask Congressman Nels specifically about questions, and he was here to, it's number 7 on the witness list, to testify about the selection process for January 6th and go through all of that. We would like that attorney to cross-examine Congressman Buck on that, and then I'll cross-examine him on what he was actually brought here to testify about and January 6th and what he went into there. Is that acceptable to Your Honor?
Yeah, I think that makes sense since we lot of moving parts here with the witnesses, and it is an expedited proceeding, so I understand that it's been hard to get people to testify.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Congressman Bach, we're going to do something a little bit unusual. As you know, as a lawyer, the rule is usually that just one person can do the cross-examination. But since the petitioners weren't aware until today that you were going to testify about the January 6th committee, they're going to have one person ask you questions about the January 6th committee, and then another person ask you about what they knew to be the subject of your testimony, which was the events of January 6th, okay?
Great, thank you, Don.
So we're starting with Mr. Grimsley.
Good afternoon, Congressman Buck. How are you?
Good afternoon, I'm fine, thank you.
You're not familiar with what the predicate requirements for satisfying Colorado Rule of Evidence 8033 are you?
I would have to read it to be able to tell you that. No, I'm not, as I sit here right now.
Yeah, it's an exception to the general rule prohibiting hearsay that applies to reports of government investigations. You're not familiar, as you sit here today, with what the requirements of that provision are?
I'm not.
Now, I want to ask you about the process for coming up with and appointing the members of the Select Committee. You know, originally the Democrats had sought to create an independent bipartisan commission to investigate the attack.
I believe Democrats and some Republicans saw that.
But the legislation failed in the Senate because of the filibuster. There weren't enough Republican votes in the Senate to overcome the filibuster, so they couldn't establish that bipartisan commission, correct?
I'm unaware of what happens in the Senate. I am aware, I believe it passed in the House.
It did pass in the House because there is not a filibuster in the House, but you know that it got out of the House and never came back from the Senate, right?
I do know that there was not an independent commission.
And you had mentioned, you know, votes a little bit before. I think you talked about the impeachment votes. After the bipartisan commission was struck down in the Senate, then there was House Resolution 503 passed to create the Select Committee. Do you recall that?
I remember a vote on the Select Committee.
And you're right that not a whole lot of Republicans voted for it. I think it was just 2. But there were 19 Republicans who just didn't vote at all because I think they didn't want to have their vote on the record. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the reason for them not voting, and I don't recall the specific numbers.
All the Democrats voted for H.R. 503, though.
I take your word.
And the Select Committee that was established by H.R. 503 was originally designated so that Speaker Pelosi would appoint 13 members, 5 of whom would be nominated or appointed after consultation with then Leader McCarthy. Is that your understanding?
That is typically how it works.
And in fact, before even Leader McCarthy nominated 5 individuals, Speaker Pelosi said she was going to appoint Republican Liz Cheney to the Select Committee. Correct?
I don't remember whether that happened before or after, but I do remember Speaker Pelosi making that announcement.
So that would have meant that there would have, instead of 8 Democrats and 5 Republicans being on the committee, there would have actually been 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans, given that Liz Cheney is a Republican. Correct?
Well, there would have been 8 appointed by the Democrat side and 5 appointed by the Republican side. One of the Democrat appointees would have been a Republican.
But just doing nose counting, that means it would have been 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans, unless for some reason that I can't possibly fathom, the Republicans that appointed a Democrat. Correct?
And when Speaker Leader McCarthy made his appointments, there was not a Democrat in that.
Yeah, so after Speaker Pelosi said at least that she was going to appoint Liz Cheney, Leader McCarthy nominated 5 Republicans for the committee, and those included Representative Rodney Davis, Representative Jim Jordan, Representative Kelly Armstrong, and Representative Troy Niels, along with Representative Jim Banks. Does that sound right?
That does sound right, yes.
And Nancy Pelosi did not reject all 5 names, did she?
That's correct.
She only rejected 2 of the names, and that was Representative Jim Jordan and Representative Jim Banks.
That's correct.
Now, you do understand, and then after she rejected those 2, then, as I think you said, Leader McCarthy pulled all the nominations down, right?
He withdrew the nominations, yes.
Speaker Pelosi said 3 of your 5 are totally fine, and you just need to nominate 2 others besides Representatives Jordan and Banks. Isn't that right?
I don't know if she said that, but that was certainly what occurred.
Now, you've been a prosecutor.
Yes.
You would not appoint a material witness to a case to sit in judgment of that case, would you?
I believe that would be a conflict.
And you do understand that while you may not agree, there were many who believed that Representative Jim Jordan was potentially a material witness to the events that happened on January 6th, correct?
I believe many people would call that.
And in fact, he's admitted that he had conversations with President Trump on the day of the attack.
I believe there were 2 conversations with President Trump and 2 others with Rudy Giuliani on that day.
And Rudy Giuliani and President Trump refused to testify before the January 6th committee, didn't they?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if President Trump did. I don't know. I know some witnesses that refused to testify were court proceedings to compel their testimony, but I'm not sure, or to hold them in contempt of Congress, but I'm not sure about Rudy.
But at the end of the day, when some of the very most important evidence in the case is going to be what did President Trump say on the day of January 6th and the attack, especially while it was happening, you're not going to seat somebody who has that information to judge the case, correct?
Well, if you're asking me or you're asking, obviously Speaker Pelosi felt that way.
I'm asking you as a former prosecutor who spoke at length about how the system is supposed to work. Do you put a material witness who has material information in charge of deciding a case?
This is not a court proceeding. The January 6th investigation is not a court proceeding, and so if you're asking me as a prosecutor, it would not apply to my experience here in Congress. I do think that everybody that was seated had evidence because they were all sitting in the chamber at the time. I'm not sure all of them, but many of them were sitting in the chamber at the time of January 6th. So I wouldn't have an eyewitness to a crime on a jury any more than I would have what you call a material witness. But this is not a jury situation. This is a congressional investigation.
Well, 2 questions there. First, you had brought up, I think, on your direct, kind of your view of cross-examination and the adversarial process and how that's really the way to get at the truth. But the fact is, this is a congressional investigation, and they just work a little bit differently than court cases, right?
Much different.
And then as far as the witnesses and all members of the House being a witness, you're certainly right that all members of the House were witnesses, at least those who were there that day, to the attack on the Capitol. But not all of them had material information about conversations they had had with the president on that day, correct?
That's correct.
And then Representative Banks was the other person that Speaker Pelosi said could not serve. And do you recall that Representative Banks issued a press release shortly after he was nominated by Leader McCarthy?
And you not recall.
Can we put up Exhibit 184, please? P-184? And we're going to share the screen here, Congressman. Hopefully you can see it. Sorry, it just takes a second. And if you could blow up the document. Can you read that? If not, I can blow it further.
I don't see any document at this point.
Oh, shit.
Here it is. I got it now.
Okay, great.
Do you see that? It's a press release from, and this is, I'll represent to you, taken from Representative Banks's congressional website.
I'm reading it right now. Do you want me to read the document?
Oh, you can read it if you'd like, or I can just ask you some questions about it. I was going to go to the third paragraph, starting if Democrats.
I see that paragraph, yes.
He says, if Democrats were serious about investigating political violence, this committee would be studying not only the January 6th riot at the Capitol, but also the hundreds of violent political riots last summer, when many more innocent Americans and law enforcement officers were attacked. And of course, the committee would not overlook the Good Friday murder of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Billy Evans that was perpetrated by a far-left extremist. He then goes on to say in the last paragraph, even then, I will do everything possible to give the American people the facts about the lead-up to January 6th, the riot that day, and the responses from Capitol leadership and the Biden administration. I will not allow this committee to be turned into a forum for condemning millions of Americans because of their political beliefs.
What possible involvement could the Biden administration have had with the events of January 6th?
I think you're going to have to ask Mr. Banks.
Yeah, do you see yourself that President Biden's administration could have had any involvement whatsoever with January 6th?
I'm unaware of any. Obviously, their administration was being formed and would be taking over on January 20th. There was a transition period at the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, but I am unaware of any activities that the Biden administration had regarding January 6th.
And you agree that if a committee is constituted to investigate a specific event like January 6th, while a member may want other things investigated, it's not appropriate to bring those things into discussion?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. In a political investigation, it is often brought in what is not happening, what this witness is not testifying about, or the witnesses that we're not allowed to call. Because again, it isn't purely a search for the truth. It is a political exercise that is being engaged in to create information for elections. That's what the political system is about.
You didn't talk to Speaker Pelosi or any members of the Select Committee who told you that the purpose of their investigation was electioneering, did you?
I have not spoken to, no, I have not spoken, but I have been present for 9 years in this place, and it's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to not coming back.
I wish that was breaking news here. We can't announce it, though, I think. So I want to ask you a little bit about the actual process that the investigative team went through in coming to the conclusions in the January 6th report. You don't dispute that the January 6th committee's investigative staff was led by a former U.S. attorney?
I'm unaware of who led that study.
You don't dispute that the investigative staff included roughly 20 lawyers?
I don't have any knowledge of the staff that was put together.
And the only reason I'm asking you this, sir, is I think that President Trump's lawyers have brought you in here to impugn the integrity and the reliability of this report. So I want to make sure I understand what you know about the process for creating it, okay? You don't dispute that some of the lawyers on the investigative staff were Republicans?
I have no knowledge.
You don't dispute that as part of the investigation, the committee and investigative staff interviewed or deposed more than 1,000 witnesses?
I know they deposed many. I'm not sure of the exact number.
You don't dispute that the January 6th committee and investigative staff collected more than 1 million documents?
Again, no knowledge.
You don't, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I would dispute.
You don't dispute that the January 6th committee and investigative staff reviewed hundreds of hours of video evidence?
Yeah, no knowledge.
You don't dispute that the January 6th committee and investigative staff reviewed more than 60 federal and state court rulings related to the 2020 election?
I have no knowledge of how many court proceedings there were.
You don't dispute that the January 6th committee and investigative staff presented testimony from more than 70 witnesses at 10 live public hearings, do you?
Again, I have no knowledge of how many witnesses were.
You don't dispute that during the investigation, more than 30 witnesses invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
I do not know that.
You don't dispute that others, including President Trump, refused to testify, asserting executive privilege.
I do know that I read stories about President Trump. I have no knowledge of others who have testified or refused to testify.
And actually, President Trump was asked to testify, and he simply refused, didn't he?
The stories that I read indicated that he asserted executive privilege. I'm not sure if there were any other reasons for not testifying.
He could have come in and cleared all this up. He could have testified before the committee, right? There's nothing that prevented him from doing so.
Look, I don't know that he could have cleared all of this up, as you characterized it. I think that there were a lot of things that happened outside of his scope of knowledge. There were certainly indications from trials that occurred in the District of Columbia that a group of people from one of the three groups that was organizing this rally had every intention to move up to the Capitol. I'm not sure if the president knew that or didn't know that, but certainly there was activities outside of his scope of knowledge that were occurring during this time.
But he certainly, if he wasn't involved with that or didn't know anything about it or hadn't coordinated with them, could have come down to Congress and said, I didn't do it.
Well, actually, the way Washington, D.C. is set up, and the way the Constitution is set up, Congress is on a hill, and you would have to come up to testify. Because the legislative branch is the superior branch.
Well, I am very sorry. He could have come up to the Hill.
He certainly could have come up to the hill and testified.
And back to the process, you don't dispute that the majority of people who were interviewed by the committee and who testified were Trump administration officials and other Republicans.
I don't know whether that it was a majority.
You know that there were a lot of Republicans, though, who testified.
I do know that, yes.
And there were a lot of people from within the Trump administration.
I'm aware that, yes, there were people from the Trump administration, from the Trump White House in particular.
And you don't dispute that a majority of the people who testified, not just behind closed doors, because we've heard about these secret deposition transcripts, but at public hearings, the 70 or so witnesses were mostly Republicans and individuals from the Trump administration.
I do not dispute.
Now, for the depositions and interviews behind closed doors before the public hearings, first, well, as a prosecutor, if you're doing an investigation and you're interviewing a lot of different people for that investigation, you're certainly not going to make the interviews public until your investigation is done, are you?
I'm not sure what you're saying. If I'm a prosecutor in a grand jury, I'm not allowed to make it public under Rule 60.
It's a bad question. I apologize. If you're a prosecutor and you're doing an investigation and you're out there with your law enforcement agents interviewing people and trying to come up with what happened and figuring it out, you don't release the transcripts of those interviews to the public until you've finished your investigation, because doing so might compromise the investigation, right?
It might taint the testimony of other witnesses.
So that's why it's not unusual, if there's an investigation, in this case a congressional investigation, to wait until the very end of the investigation to release those types of transcripts.
You're talking about the private transcripts.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. My only experience in terms of congressional investigations, other than watching the January 6th investigation from a distance, was the Iran-Contra investigation. I was a staffer on that. We did not release transcripts at the time that those transcripts were made. We put a report out, a minority report, and released the transcripts sometime later, if at all. Some of them were obviously classified and were not released.
And that's typical, right? If there are transcripts that have in them classified information, you have to weigh the balance between keeping classified information classified and letting the public see it. And you can err on the side of keeping it classified, right?
Well, actually, we don't make that decision. The executive branch makes that decision, and it is not based on the balance of interest. It's based on protecting humans and sources of evidence.
Now, as far as the interviews and depositions that were behind the scenes during the investigation, you don't dispute that people who were deposed were sworn and deposed under oath, and that people who were interviewed were advised that under 18 U.S.C. section 1001, they cannot provide materially false or misleading information or otherwise be subject to felony prosecution. You don't dispute that those things went on.
My experience in congressional hearings is that witnesses are put under oath.
And when they're not, if they're interviews, is it your experience as well that they're told that providing materially false or misleading information to Congress is a felony offense?
Yes, and typically sign a statement to that effect.
And you don't dispute that except for a few documents implicating national security concerns, the confidential ones we were talking about, the January 6th committee posted every document, every recorded interview and deposition, and every exhibit cited in the January 6th committee's final report on its official public website.
Yeah. What they didn't post were the questions that weren't asked, and they didn't post the documents that weren't subpoenaed, and they didn't post the interviews that didn't occur. But in terms of posting everything that they had, yes.
Can you think of any witness that somebody believed had material information for purposes of the investigation that was not permitted to come and give a deposition or interview?
I don't think typically people come and volunteer information. I can think of, for example, Jim Bjorklund, who the staff did, according to Jim, I have no personal knowledge of this, but according to Jim, did not, the committee staff did not follow up and ask him the questions, and therefore the section of the report on Jim, he alleges is misleading.
Well, to be fair, this proceeding is not about Jim Jordan. And Jim Jordan's involvement in the insurrection is not at issue here. So can you think of any other witness besides Jim Jordan who you think had information they wanted to provide but wasn't able to?
I am not aware of how the committee went about choosing witnesses and other potential witnesses that did not give testimony.
Are you aware of any witness that any Republican passed to the investigative staff saying that that individual had material information that the investigative staff did not reach out to?
I am aware that it was either the chief of the Capitol Police or the sergeant of arms testified in Leader McCarthy's investigation, and I'm not aware of whether those witnesses testified in the January 6th investigation in public or private.
And the McCarthy investigation that you're talking about was the shadow committee that conducted an investigation, the committee consisting of the 5 members that Leader McCarthy had originally nominated for the January 6th Select Committee?
I don't know about your characterization of shadow, but it was a group that Leader McCarthy tasked with looking into, a group of members looking into the events of January 6th.
And they actually issued a report. Do you recall that?
I do not recall ever seeing the report. I remember a press release about it.
You weren't interested in looking at the report?
I am not interested in looking at it.
And are you aware of anything in that report from those 5 congresspeople that contradicts anything in the January 6th report?
I have no basis to compare it to.
Now, you don't dispute that the final report of the committee and the findings contained therein were unanimously approved by all members of the Select Committee?
I have no reason to dispute that.
And you don't dispute that if a member of the committee disagreed with any finding, that member could have objected?
Again, I don't know what their procedures were.
And you mentioned a minority report earlier. Those are common, but they're not required, correct?
There is no Typically, in the legislation that creates a committee, there is a provision for a minority report. I don't know if there was in this legislation. I don't recall.
But just because there's a provision that allows for a minority report is not required if at the end of the day everybody agrees on what the truth is.
Of course.
I've asked you about people that may have had relevant information that weren't allowed to provide it. Can you identify any document that you believe was relevant to the January 6th investigation that the committee did not consider?
I'm not aware of it.
And you were asking questions about the public hearings and how witnesses were questioned in those hearings. You don't have any idea how the witnesses were questioned during their depositions or interviews.
I know the procedure because I've been involved in investigation in the House during my time as a congressman. I don't know if those procedures were followed by the January 6th.
Now, you raised the impeachment, the second impeachment and the vote in the House, I think, on your direct examination.
Yes, I did mention.
You do know that the second impeachment, the vote for the article of impeachment, was the most bipartisan vote for impeachment in the history of the United States. Do you not?
I'm trying to think of how many impeachment votes we've had.
5.
Okay, well, it was certainly more, in my experience, it was more bipartisan than the first impeachment of President Trump. There was one Democrat who voted with the Republicans on the first impeachment. And in this vote, there were 10 or 12 Republicans who voted with Democrats on impeachment.
Yeah, I'll represent to you that it was all of the Democrats and 10 Republicans in the House voted for impeachment. And that was more people from the president's party than had ever voted on impeachment before. Does that sound about right?
I accept that, yes.
And then after the article of impeachment was sent over to the Senate voted in the most bipartisan fashion for conviction of any of the, I think, 3 trials in the history of the United States.
Your Honor, I would object to this. We've certainly talked about the January 6th report. This is about Congress's actions and historical bipartisanship, well beyond the scope.
Well, I think 80% of his testimony was beyond the scope of his disclosure.
That's comment notwithstanding, and we certainly understand the perspective of the petitioners. It's still beyond the scope of the directive.
This is Jane objection.
Judge, may I interrupt for one moment, please?
Oh, yes. Do you need to leave?
I don't. 5 minutes ago, we had a 15-minute vote called. As is typical in Congress, that means I have 30 minutes left. I just wanted to ask the board if I could, in about 10, 15 minutes, leave to go walk over to the Capitol.
Yeah, you just tell us when you need to and we will accommodate your schedule.
Thank you.
Well, I had about 5 more minutes on the Senate's trial of President Trump, so I will not be asking those, it seems. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Mario Nicholas.
Congressman, let me start by just saying it's good to see you again, and thank you for your 8 years and 10 months worth of service, and I'm sure you're counting days at this point.
Hours.
I do not blame you. Congressman, I'm going to focus mostly on January 6th and events of that and some of your comments about it. You had said that you were on the floor of the House of Representatives, maybe roughly around 2 p.m. that day?
I don't recall the time, but it was afternoon. I don't know that.
Okay. And you said you were discussing an objection to the certification. Is that right?
I believe the debate had started on the certification, and the speaker was presiding. I remember she was in the chair and was removed, and that would indicate that she was presiding on the debate because the vice president oversees the county. So he had withdrawn from the House floor at that point.
Okay. And the objection that day that was being discussed involved concerns about voting irregularities or voting fraud in the 2020 election.
In particular in Arizona, yes.
Okay. Now, you said that it was unusual, something unusual happened that day, and that that you were interrupted, and there was an officer who came up and spoke with you, and that you knew that there was danger at that point. Was that your testimony?
Yeah, actually, the officer didn't speak to me. The officer addressed the House floor at that point. But yes, I believe what she said was that the House had been breached, and that tear gas had been deployed, and then we had tear gas masks under the nose.
And then you later testified that officers had drawn guns while they were on the House floor.
That's my memory, yes.
And later you testified that there were shots fired, but you didn't hear it.
That's correct.
And you testified that there was a mob outside.
I testified that when I got back to my office and looked at the TV, that there were many more people in the building and outside the building than I had believed when I was inside the house.
But you used the term mob outside.
Okay. A large number of people, yes.
Okay. You also testified about, that there was a disturbance in summer of 2020. Was that right? You testified about that?
Yes.
Were there ever guns drawn on the House floor during that event?
The protesters in 2020 never breached the Capitol building, and I don't believe there were guns drawn on the House floor.
Were there ever shots fired in the Capitol, to your knowledge, during that event?
No, not to my knowledge.
What about in 2016? You said that Congress was shut down because of a mass shooting. I believe that's what you testified to, right? Not in Congress, but elsewhere that was going on.
Yeah, I believe it was a school shooting. The Democrats were trying to bring up full legislation, and they occupied the floor to prevent work from being done in 2016. I think it was June of 2016.
Okay. Was there any physical danger at that point, do you believe, during that event?
If you're asking me, there's pushing and shoving. My memory is that there was some typical testosterone acts, but there was certainly no weapon drawn. There was no assault in that sense.
That was between members of Congress pushing and shoving.
That was members of Congress sort of more intimidating than really actually pushing and shoving.
Okay. But there were no guns drawn on that day either.
That's correct.
And there were no shots fired on that day either.
That's correct.
So going back to January 6th, after there were guns drawn and shots fired, you were evacuated from the House floor by the USCP.
That's correct.
And so you were not able to finish the objection process at that time.
That's right. It was so.
And when did you finish that objection process?
A few hours later, I don't recall exactly the time frame, but a few hours later, we came back to the House floor and finished hearing the Arizona debate and voted, and then the Senate returned and we continued the process.
Does it sound right that it was about roughly 11 p.m. that you voted to certify the election, so voted against the motion to object certification? Does 11 p.m. sound roughly right?
Yeah, 11 p.m. sounds right, and I voted to certify, so I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
I voted against the motion to decertify, yes.
Let me see if I can clarify. You voted against the objections.
That's correct.
Okay. And then, was the electoral vote certified on that day, on January 6th?
I think it was the morning of January 7th that the hearing was concluded.
So does it sound roughly right that around 3 a.m. On January 7th, it was certified? Okay. Congressman, this August you appeared on an interview on MSNBC with Andrea Mitchell, right?
I've appeared a number of times. I'm not sure which one.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't I play a clip, then maybe that might help me remember?
Great.
If you would pull up 206, starting at 104. I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Hine to go ahead and play that, and from 104 to about 137.
Does the former president need to tell his supporters to try to avoid violence at all costs, instead of saying, well, there's a level of passion that I've never seen, as he said last night, a level of hatred I've never seen, and that's a bad combination to use his words?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he absolutely needs to tell all Americans to stand down and allow the judicial system to take its course. We trust judges, we trust juries, we trust appellate courts.
And that was you, correct, Congressman?
Yes, it is.
Do you remember that interview?
I don't recall a specific interview, but
Sure.
it was me.
Okay, fair enough. So you were saying that you agree that, yeah, I think he does need to call on people to stop violence, to stand down. Do you believe former President Trump's supporters act, and sometimes with violence, based on his statements?
Objection, Your Honor, well beyond the direct, nor is this seeking bias evidence. He's asking Representative Buck's opinion on other people's actions.
Your Honor, these are consistent statements with the findings of the January 6th report.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Do you want me to repeat the question, Congressman? You believe, based on what you were saying there, you believe former President Trump's supporters listen to President Trump when he gives them a command?
That's a long answer.
Feel free.
I'm sorry?
Feel free. Go ahead. Assume it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, I struggle with it. So I think if President Trump says, it's your duty to vote, you need to go vote, I think that his supporters would listen to that and follow those instructions. I think if President Trump says, I want you to go kill somebody, I don't think that political supporters, being political supporters and not otherwise engaged, would go kill somebody. So I think it depends on what the order is, and I think it depends on the legality of the order, and I think it depends on the context of the order.
If President Trump, say, asked violent attackers to go home, do you think they would listen to him?
Your Honor, I am again going to object. I mean, our direct exam was pretty darn specific to events that happened in the Capitol on January 6th.
And I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay.
He basically, Congressman Buck hasn't really said there's anything he disagrees with about the January 6th report. So I'm not sure the fact that he has consistent thoughts is really impeachment.
Okay. I'll move on, Your Honor. I can move on. Congressman Buck, yesterday you released a video announcing that you weren't going to seek re-election. Is that right?
That's correct.
And in that video, you said too many Republican leaders are lying to America, claiming the 2020 election was stolen, describing January 6th as an unguided tour of the Capitol, and asserting that the ensuing prosecutions are weaponizations of our justice system. Did you say that in that video?
I did.
And did you also say these insidious narratives breed widespread cynicism and erode Americans' confidence in the rule of law? Did you say that as well?
I did.
What are the lies and insidious narratives regarding the 2020 election and January 6th that you're talking about?
So,
Your Honor, may I object again? This is maybe salacious political material, but it's beyond scope of direct. It's not for bias. And if we want to avoid this becoming a circus, we should not go into the process.
What's the relevance?
Your Honor, it's relevant because there are questions about January 6th and his statements about January 6th. Furthermore, he said that the objections were about voter fraud and voter irregularities that they discussed on January 6th, all of which was brought up during direct examination. We should have the ability to go ahead and cross him about his opinions about all of these. And I mean, I think, you know, it's if they didn't want to hear from the congressman about this, maybe they shouldn't have called him.
Your Honor, if they wanted to listen to Representative Buck's opinions about what happened on January 6th, if they wanted to listen to Representative Buck's opinions on election fraud, if they wanted to make this case about whether election fraud occurred or not, they could have brought a different complaint, and they could have endorsed Representative Buck as a witness. The direct exam was on, and we worked very hard to prevent this from becoming a circus. The direct exam was on the events that happened in the Capitol on January 6th, on that one day, in Representative Buck's experience, and with respect to the process of the January 6th committee. Now, Mr. Nicholas's colleague has done the cross-exam with respect to the latter half of the testimony, which we didn't object to. And so this part of the cross, my guess, is supposed to be on the events that happened in the Capitol that Representative Buck saw on January 6th. We did not turn this into a circus with respect to Representative Swalwell, his political activities, his opinions, his behaviors, which we easily could have. If this is not biased testimony, and this is well beyond what we're here for today.
I don't sustain the objection. I think that I'm not sure what. I think it's outside the scope of the direct. So why don't you move on to your next topic if you have one?
Sure, Your Honor. Congressman Buck,
Hold on.
do you need to go?
Congressman Buck, do you need to go? He's muted now. We can't hear you anymore.
Congressman Buck, we've had an issue before where if you hit mute, then the clerk has to unmute you.
All right, how are you for time, Congressman Buck?
I've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, well, I'll try to see if we can go quickly. About Congressman Buck, you testified about speaking with Jim Jordan about his speakership nomination, right?
Right.
And 2 weeks ago, on October 17th, you appeared on the television show The Lead with Jake Tapper to discuss that issue as well. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you remember saying on that show to Jake Tapper that, and I think that if we have a presidential candidate who now is leading, who denies that he lost the election and was obviously behind what happened on January 6th, do you remember saying that to Jake Tapper in that interview?
I don't remember, but I don't dispute that I said something.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me see if we can refresh your memory a little bit. If you can pull up 269 and start from 0 to 042.
Your Honor, I object to this on the same grounds as before. And I will continue to do so. If we want to litigate these issues through Representative Buck's opinion, I think we need additional time in this case. But that's not why we're here. That's not why we called him as a witness. If Mr. Nicholas had wanted to go in this area, he could have interviewed Representative Buck and asked questions along these lines.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Were you talking about Speaker, the nomination of Speaker Jordan at that time with Jake Tapper?
Objection, Your Honor. We will renew it for the same reasons.
They brought up, Your Honor, discussion of the congressman testified to this during direct about speaking about the nomination of Jim Jordan. And in fact, that's when he talked to him about all the information that he got about the January 6th report. I think we can ask him about what things that he said around that nomination period?
Just because you say multiple things during a conversation doesn't make them, one, relevant to this case, or B, not outside the scope of the direct.
Okay.
So, objection sustained.
Congressman, again, I just want to repeat that you had used the phrase mob to describe the people outside the building earlier during the direct. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
And you remember me asking about that?
Yes.
Have you recently used that term to refer to the people outside on January 6th?
I've used
More
it
recent today?
Have you used it? Did you use it yesterday?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Did you use the term mob to refer to the people outside the building yesterday?
Yeah, I did a number of interviews yesterday, and I may have used the term. It is my feeling of what was going on at the time. And Judge, I apologize, but I've got to run if that's okay.
I have one more question.
Oh, you just have one more question?
Yeah.
He's going to have a redirect, so hold on.
Okay.
Is there any way, Congressman, that you can come back to finish your testimony?
I look forward to it. Yes.
So, Congressman Buck, will you just correspond with Mr. Gessler about how that's going to all work?
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and we will, it doesn't sound like they have much more, but I think we will need you to come back and finish it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Your Honor.
Do I have time for one question, or?
Oh, he's gone. Oh, I think.
Okay.
You were released. I think
Okay.
you should come back.
My redirect is one question.
I know, but I think he wants to
Okay,
wait.
that's fine.
So just let Mr. Gessler know when you're available again.
Okay, thank you.
Vote. Thank you. So you can leave.
Your Honor, we'll recall Mr. Bjorklund to the stand. Okay.
They were just on the other end of the hall. You know how long the hall is?
Yeah, we could hear that.
It's not as long apparently as the tunnel.
Yes.
Did I introduce 1014?
No, that's right, picking it.
Okay. Jeff.
Sorry.
Mr. Bjorklund, you're still in order. Thank you. Thank you for being so accommodating.
Hello again, Mr. Bjorklund. We're going to pick up where overlap. Oh, one moment. We have a tech break minute. Okay, so you can see the screen there?
Yes.
Okay, so we had just finished talking about Exhibit 1013, and I'm going to ask that Exhibit 1013 be played again, just to refresh your memory so we can get back into your testimony.
Okay.
Okay, we can cut that. So you remember that video?
Yes.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, you said you were towards the side of the Capitol, working your way around the Capitol?
Yeah, going back to our car.
Well, no. I'm sorry, were you headed back to your car, or were you still headed around the Capitol at that point?
I believe that one was on the way back to the car. That's what I was asking.
I will represent to you that your earlier testimony was that you were still walking around the Capitol at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever go around the entire Capitol towards the, well, what's called the front of the Capitol, but is actually sort of the side opposite the Washington Monument?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me sort of what happened from basically roughly where that video was to around the Capitol.
Well, that right there, they were, firing tear gas and flashbangs, and people were chanting USA. And obviously, I stayed on the side. I didn't go into the big crowd. But yeah, I was heading back to going around the Capitol side.
Okay. And what did you see as you walked around the Capitol, if anything notable?
Just a lot of people with flags. Didn't seem to be a lot of movement. There was a guy, on a bullhorn chanting or telling people to go in or move forward, and telling people. I noticed that there was him. There was another person on the other side of this crowd too. So in the same thing, they had bullhorns. I noticed there was bullhorns on both sides. And people were trying to herd the crowd into where they were firing flashbangs and tear gas.
And were people in the crowd moving in?
From what I saw, people were dispersing when tear gas and flashbangs were going off, but I didn't go into the middle of that, so I didn't. I don't know from that point. From my vantage point, I don't know. The people that I saw mostly were just standing there, and I just felt like the police just didn't want people standing there and hanging around where they were at. I didn't know why, but I just knew that they weren't very happy about it.
Okay. Let's go to Exhibit 1014, please. Okay, so that's another video. Where are you right now? Did you take this video?
I did. This is my video. And this is the U.S. House of Representatives on the front of the Capitol. So if you're facing the front of the Capitol, it'll be on the left side of that.
Okay. And if you're facing the Capitol, what's to your back?
Streetcar, police cars. There was like a pull through, like a road.
Okay. Where's the Washington Monument? I'm just trying to orient ourselves. Where's the Washington Monument in relation to this?
There will be on the opposite side of that building. So I had already come around where those trees are. Actually, I came right through those trees and around. And there's a little parking lot there, and there was a whole bunch of police cars, and I walked right through them. And there was a whole bunch of police that were, they were grabbing duffel bags and stuff. And I said, "Hi guys," and they didn't stop and chat. I walked right through the center of them, and right through their cars. I mean, they were grabbing stuff out of their cars and stuff, and I just went right through their cars, and they didn't say anything to me at all.
And when you said hi to them, did they say anything to you?
No, didn't say hi back. I just said hi guys, and they didn't say a word.
I mean, did they hear you? How close were you?
Yeah, no, I was maybe from me to the reporter.
I'm sorry, from you to?
Here. I don't 50 feet.
Thank you. I mean, when you say from me to this other person, it's sort of hard to see in the record. So you say?
I probably came within 5 feet of the guy that was walked right by me with a duffel bag.
Okay. And are there any police officers in that photo?
Yeah, there are. This is when I first rounded the corner. The police officers are in green, and if you see someone with the orange, the yellow on their vest, they were actually staggered. There was more of a formation than there is in this view, but they were staggered like on one stair and then down the next stair and then up on the same level stair. And they were staggered in a V formation across that, all the way across. And you can see they're kind of still there, but they were starting to break formation.
Okay, when you say across there, can you be?
So right where those balconies kind of jut out, I think those are balconies. They might be staircases. I don't know.
Are you talking on towards the left side of the photo or the right side of the photo?
All the way across.
Okay.
They were from one side of that, where those fancy lamps are. They were like staggered, going all the way across that.
Okay. So were they sort of forming a line across that? Would people have to cross that line to get up the stairs?
And there wasn't anybody going up there until there's one guy that kind of went up to one of the police officers and asked if he could go up and look in the window.
Did you hear that exchange?
I was right there. I was really close by.
The question, can I go up to the window, is not introduced for the truth of the matter asserted. It doesn't assert anything is truthful. It's simply a witness to a question.
The objection's overruled.
Okay. How did the police react to that question?
One officer looked over his right shoulder at the other officer, and that officer shrugged, and he said, "Sure, go ahead."
And then what happened after that?
Then the police marched off. They walked off the line, and they just went to the left. At this picture, they went to the left that direction.
And then what did people do?
They all just started going up the stairs.
Okay. Did you walk up the stairs?
I did.
And what did you see up there?
Well, the first thing that I did is I went between the columns, and I went to the left side of that building, and then I put my hand on the flagpole, and I prayed for protection.
Okay. And then after that, what did you Well, before I ask that next question, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit 1014.
No objection.
1014 submitted.
Okay. So after you did, so what did you see that happened after that?
There were people beating on the windows on the right side over there by the doors, and so the doors are, you can kind of see the black like void there that next to that lamp. On that side of some windows, and they were just banging on the windows, and they were yelling, "Let us in."
How many people were banging on the windows?
Maybe 3.
Okay. And
Maybe 4.
4 people? Okay. And how many people, is that an accurate representation of sort of the number of people that were up there at the time? Those 4 people were banging on the windows?
Well, at this point, in this picture, there wasn't anybody up there. It wasn't until the officer said that we could go up there, then people went up there.
Okay.
And then they immediately started banging on the windows.
Okay.
Their fists, just banging and making a lot of noise.
Okay. Did you bang on any of the windows?
No.
Okay. What did you see happen after that then?
I saw a guy, a kind of scruffy looking guy. He had a beard and long hair, and he had a metal baton, and he telescoped it out. It was a fully telescopic metal baton, and then he walked right up to the doors, and his windows are like probably 2.5 inches thick, and he just whacked, and all it did was just to a little tiny, like a marble would hit it, and it just put a little divot in the window, and then he just kept whacking that window. And
Let me interrupt you just for a second. Which window exactly was he hitting?
on the doors. The doors had they were shut and they were locked. I mean, they tried that to see they were trying to open them.
Okay.
And he whacked the window, and then I was over to the right. I was on that right balcony, and then 2 gentlemen, they had flags, and they took a flag and they covered over the other guy, and then I heard them smashing the windows.
Which windows did you hear them smash?
To the right of that door, there's probably 2 windows, and I think one of those was a break room or something, because I saw right through the window. It looked like some kind of like a break room or something that you would have at the office.
Okay. Did you say anything?
Yes, I do, not cool.
Okay. Did anyone else in the crowd say anything, or what was the crowd's reaction at that point?
Right before that, a young man came up to me and said that, "Where's your mask?" And I said, "I'm not afraid of COVID." And he said, "No, to hide your identity." And I said, "I'm not doing anything that I need to worry about hiding."
Okay. How did people in the crowd or the crowd react to those? I guess you said one person breaking a window and another covering him with a flag. How did the crowd respond to that?
Well, they looked at me because I was clearly not happy, and then I started to leave, and other people started to leave.
Okay.
They started walking down. You could tell they were visibly not happy about this, smashing the windows.
Did you see anyone entering the Capitol?
Yes.
Now, describe that situation.
At one point, they broke through the window in the break room, and they went through that window. And then within, maybe 3 minutes, the big doors opened. And they were these big metal, heavy doors with the 2-inch thick glass on the doors, or at least 2 inches. And inside, I could see the metal detectors, and they were going off.
Okay.
And they were like beeping. And so then I saw them going in, and I saw other people coming out.
Okay. Now, so that group of police, where were the police at this time?
They had already left. They were nowhere around.
Okay. Did you go in the Capitol?
No.
And why not?
Well, it was tempting, but I saw the metal detectors going off, and I thought we're not supposed to go in there. And so these guys were going through. A gentleman came out. He looked like a professional, just nice haircut. And he had a young man with him, and I said, "Did you take a nice tour?" And he said, "It's really cool in there. You should go in." And I said, "Dude, there are cameras in there, and I don't think they want us in that building."
Okay. Let's go to the next exhibit, please. Now, is that video after you came back down the stairs?
Yeah, and I'm standing by the police cars.
Okay. Why did you stand by the police cars?
I just felt like that was probably a safe place to be, rather than near where they were, breaking in. I didn't want any part of that.
Okay. What were the people like around you at that point?
Steve actually ended up finding me and meeting up with me through text or something. We communicated somehow, and I told him where I was, and he came around, and he just stood by me, and we were standing there by the police cars and making commentary about the people and just, talking about the general crowd.
Okay. I'd like to move to introduce Exhibit 1015, Your Honor.
No objection.
1015 submitted.
Let's go to Exhibit 1016, please. So what's going on there?
So this was very close to where a bunch of people had come running down the stairs, and they said that they were shooting people inside the Capitol.
And what was your reaction to that?
I didn't believe them. I thought that was really stupid. And and then they said it was a little girl. And I was like, oh yeah, right, there's a little girl in the Capitol, and they shot her.
And so why didn't you believe it?
It just seemed absurd. I mean, people they're milling about, they're nonviolent, people breaking the windows. I didn't see any weapons, and the police told us that we could go up. Now, nobody asked that they could go in, that I know of, but the police said that we could go up to the windows. And then I just had a hard time believing that, back to blue, Trump supporters are going to, go in and do anything that they need to be shot. And I didn't believe that the police would shoot anybody. I thought that was absurd.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to... And did you take this video here?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and that's what was going on around you at the time?
Uh-huh.
I'd like to introduce Exhibit 1016 into evidence.
No issue.
1016 submitted.
Your Honor, you have a look on your face like you want to ask a question. Okay, I want to make sure we're giving you full information. Let's go to Exhibit 1017, please. Now, what's this a photo of?
So this is a gentleman, I saw that, I really liked his outfit. We were actually leaving, Steve and I said, let's get out of here, because I had gotten a text from Mayor Bowser, the mayor, and she said that, it said that they requested that everybody leave the Capitol. And right before that, my brother had radioed and said that Donald Trump said to be peaceful and, not to cause any trouble.
Okay.
And then he was standing there, I saw him, and he was just very happy. He was just a really super nice guy. And I asked him, I said, I like your outfit, can I take a picture? And I'd already taken this picture of him, he didn't know I took it, but he said, sure, and then he posed for my picture.
Okay, let's go, next exhibit, please. Okay. Is that the same person?
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Now, why did you want to take a picture of him?
I really liked his outfit. I thought it was really funny, actually. Even down to the shoes, he's got red stripes on his left shoe and then blue stripes on his other shoe. And then just the whole, his whole, the way he was put together. And I thought it was funny. He had a pitchfork and he had the 1776 flag or whatever. But very young, vibrant guy and very friendly. Just super nice guy. I could tell I just liked him instantly.
Okay. Did you chat with him at all?
Yeah, I said, hey, that's pretty cool outfit. And, and he said thanks. And I asked him to take a picture. And other people were talking to him too. But he was just standing there. That's all he did was, he just stood there the whole time. I didn't see him leave or anything.
Okay.
But we were on our way out. We were splitting.
Your Honor, I'd like to introduce exhibits. Which one is that? 1016 and 1017. Your Honor. I'm sorry, 17 and 18. Your Honor.
10, 17, and 1018 are submitted.
Okay. So you said that you received a call from your brother.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly was that about?
Well, he said he wanted me to text or tell him what was going on. My phone was down to 5% at this point. There was very, very little battery life left, and so that's probably partly why I was still sparing the pictures and things, because even when we arrived, I think I started at 50%. My phone was rapidly going down. But he had said that Trump. He said Trump said to be peaceful, and that's what he commented. And somebody else from not even there said, "Oh, that's a really tall order," and that guy was not even at the Capitol, as far as I could tell, because he kept asking for information on what was going on. That same guy, same voice.
When you say the same voice, what do you mean by that?
We had this app called Zello, and it was like a walkie-talkie, and there was probably 60 people that were on it, and we were just talking back and forth what was. It was part of our caravan. We used that to caravan over, and it was part of that USEIP group that put that all together, and they invited me to join them since I was going to drive up there.
Okay. Now you said you got a text from Mayor. The D.C. mayor, is that correct?
Yeah, it was like an emergency broadcast type of text. It just came across my phone and it said, please leave the Capitol.
Okay. So what did you do then?
Moved at the Capitol.
Let's go to Exhibit 1019. I'm sorry, that's sideways, Your Honor. Is there any way we can turn that around, do you think? Okay. Can you describe what's going on in here?
So we were on our way out, and that was the same scene. Basically, that's why I got confused when I came in, because this is almost exactly like the other one, because I was actually leaving at that point. And so I just wanted to get a sense of the crowd and what was going on.
Okay. So in relation to the Capitol, is it fair to say you were retracing your steps? Where were you exactly?
Yeah, we were retracing. Actually, I had cut through the trees when I went through, but then we actually came back around on the sidewalk, and then we wanted to get to the middle of the mall so we could go find our way back to the Washington Monument, find our car.
Okay.
And I just took that quick. And my videos are shorter, and obviously I'm not a very good photographer, but that was just a quick snapshot. sense of what was going on.
At this point here, did you see any violent behavior, or how was the crowd behaving?
None. Yeah, really, they were walking. Everybody was just milling around. People were walking around the side that we had just come from, and other people were going. They were just coming and going, walking around like, you know. And I didn't hear any more flashbangs or tear gas or anything. So, but we were leaving because we got a text to say to leave.
Did you see any police at that point?
No, I didn't see any police at all from here on out.
Okay. Let's go to Exhibit 1020. And while we're doing that, Your Honor, I'd move for admission of Exhibit 1019. Oh, hold on just a second, please.
No objection.
Exhibit 1019? Is that the right number?
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 1019 is submitted.
Okay, can you play that, please? And what's happening in that video?
Well, this is the first time I got as close as I did to the bleachers in the big crowd. But we were, that was us just leaving, and I just took that video because I thought I saw those people up there, and you know, and originally we actually thought that Trump was going to be speaking in that area when we heard fireworks. We thought Trump was going to be up on that there was like a platform up there. But you know, we saw the flashbangs and stuff. So I mean, I just wanted to get a view of that, and by this time it was obvious that Trump was not going to show up and give a speech.
Your Honor, I'd move to introduce Exhibit 1020.
No objection.
Exhibit 1020 submitted.
Okay. So what did you do after that?
We just hooked it back to the monument. We listened to our, you know, the comms. There was somebody talking about their father was elderly and needed a ride, and he was worried about it because he couldn't walk, and he was worried about walking back. I remember that part. But yeah, I was right in there. And we were just on our way back to the car.
Okay. And then did you go directly to the car?
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. We went to the car and had a little rally with my brother, who was waiting for us at the car. And it was just Steve and I going back.
I'm sorry. When you say Steve and I going back where?
Back to the car, to the Washington Monument. We went to the monument, and then from there we went to our car, which was across the monument.
Okay. I'd like to turn to petitioners. What's labeled petitioners Exhibit 207? Could you bring that up, please? Okay, so I'm showing you what's been marked as petitioners Exhibit 207. I want you to go to the second paragraph, and it says, you know, it says a newspaper reported that you were driving to Washington and that you announced that you were to, quote, go into the fray.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? And it says that you announced that in a Facebook post, that you were driving to, quote, go into the fray. Did you in fact write that on a Facebook post?
Yes, I did.
And what did you mean by that?
I meant that we were concerned about Antifa and Black Lives Matter, you know, attacking people, and you know, it's something that I consistently saw at Trump rallies or anything where there was Trump involved, or violent left-wing radicals trying to hurt people, and I was concerned about that, but I decided to go anyway.
So when you were referring to the fray, what were you referring to there?
Just that I expected that we were going to encounter people that were violent towards the group.
Okay. So I'd like you to, let's go to this page. This third page, please, over there. Scroll down a little bit further. Okay, right there. So if you look at that, it says that you said that you saw people in black bloc coming down the mall path, carrying Trump flags upside down. You knew something was up. And then it goes on to say, but still the people who blindly followed agent provocateurs' instructions should have known better. Everything about that moment screamed, this is a setup. You see that?
Yep.
Did you write that?
I did.
What did you mean by that?
Well, I saw people that were, like the guys with the bullhorns, and they were trying to push people into the Capitol and trying to make people that herd them in. And so that was my observation at that point, where they had the bullhorns, and there were people that had, like that guy that asked me why I wasn't wearing a mask. He seemed out of place. He didn't seem like a Trump guy. And then there were other people that I felt like that just, there was actually, I met a gentleman named, he called himself Jaden X, and he had been, when I was standing in front of the police cars, he was on my right-hand side. And there was kind of a small crowd around him, and Steve asked me, he goes, what's that guy doing? I said, that guy's Antifa. And he goes, how do you know? He goes, what do you think they're saying? I said, I don't know, I'm going to go find out. So I walked over there, and this guy was saying that he had video of a woman getting shot, And I asked him, can I see it? And he said, I just played for these guys and I have to go. And everybody else there was like, they were shocked. They were all talking about what they had witnessed. And he said, I have to go, but take a picture of my phone and I will post this to Twitter. And he said, and you can find the video on Twitter. He said, it probably won't be up very long, but you can witness it on Twitter. So I took a picture of his phone and it said Jaden X, and it had words like revolutionary and all of that. And so I went back to my friend Steve and I said, yep, he's Antifa.
Okay.
And that's what I was talking about with the black bloc. And he didn't have any Trump gear, and I don't know, just a weird feeling about him.
Okay. And then towards the bottom it says, but when it became apparent that what was transpiring at the Capitol, including a large trail of blood...
What was transpiring?
Yes, I'm sorry. What was transpiring at the Capitol, including a large trail of blood that I had to step over, I decided to leave. Did you write those words?
I did.
And is there anything you want to add to the statement that you said when it became transparent what was transpiring at the Capitol? We'll get to the trail of blood in a sec. I decided to leave.
Well, vandalism.
Okay.
Things that I didn't come there for, and things that I didn't agree with. It was very clear to me that this wasn't what was planned, and I just felt like people were just acting stupidly, and I really felt like this actually was counterproductive to what Trump was trying to do.
Okay. Now you say there that it included a large trail of blood that you had to step over. What's that about?
So right when that gentleman was standing with the pitchfork and the fight and the stars and stripes, right down below him was a sidewalk, and it went up to the side of the Capitol, and there were these pretty good sized, maybe silver dollar size, maybe bigger splashes of blood, and it went from the curb all the way up to the side of that Capitol building. There was like a ramp for wheelchair access, and that had blood all the way up to that, and it was quite a lot of blood. And then there was a man standing there, and he said he got video of a young girl being wheeled out on a stretcher. And it was at that point that I believe somebody did get shot. And he had video he showed me of the gurney coming out and this girl. And his comment was, she was like 95 pounds, and they shot her. And this is in our United States Capitol.
Okay. And was that one of the things that, when you became apparent what was transpiring, is that one of the reasons you left?
Definitely. And right before that, Jaden X, and there was another man he had a blue hoodie on and he had his hat on backwards, and he was telling people to go in and take revenge because somebody had been shot, and he was trying to get people to go into the Capitol. And that's when I was like, these guys are they're like agent provocateurs. This is not intended. This is all wrong.
Okay. So you've come here to testify today. Have you done it under subpoena?
No, I can't.
And why'd you come here?
I just felt like it was important that the truth came out. But when I saw it, I don't believe that there was any kind of insurrection. I think it's a ridiculous narrative. And
Yes, Your Honor, strike this position is relevant.
And I just felt like it's kind of an insult to insurrectionists around the world because Republicans just mad about an election hardly rises to the level of an insurrection, and I wanted to just make that clear that that's a political narrative, and I recognize that I probably was in an area that I shouldn't be, and I felt like I didn't care.
You didn't care about what?
What the consequences are, because I feel the truth is more important.
When you say the consequences, are the consequences of what?
Well, I guess there was grassy areas that I was supposed to walk on that I did, and I didn't have any. There were no signs or anything, but after the fact, they were arresting people that were in the area that I was, and I feel like I'm a little bit nervous about that.
And why are you nervous about that?
Because I just feel like they're trying to take revenge, and on people who disagree, and the whole narrative that there's an insurrection is so absurd that. But I know that people are married to that position, and they want to make an example of people like me just for walking on the grass. And
so, what do you consider when you earlier testified you don't care about the consequences? When you say what consequences are you concerned about?
Well, I've seen a lot of video of people like getting their doors kicked in and FBI showing up and pulling people out of their houses and putting handcuffs on. And I don't want that for me and my family. But the truth needs to come out because and why words is yes.
Okay, I have no more questions, Your Honor.
see what's going on with Congressman Bjorklund when he's able to return?
Yes,
Good afternoon, Mr. Bjorklund. You're the treasurer of the Colorado Republican Party, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And you understand that the Colorado Republican Party is a party to this lawsuit?
Yes, I do understand that.
And you understand that President Trump is a party to this lawsuit?
Yes, I do.
And you're here today testifying as a witness on behalf of President Trump, is that right?
I'm testifying as a witness to the truth. That's why I'm here.
But you appeared on President Trump's witness list, you understand that, right?
I'm not a party to the C in the witness list. I don't know who's on the witness list.
You're a supporter of President Trump, aren't you?
I am mildly a supporter.
You went to his rally at the Ellipse, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to see my brother.
Do you think the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump?
I don't have any proof of that. I don't know.
You're aware that President Trump has stated that the 2020 election was stolen from him.
Yeah, I'm aware that he stated that.
So do you think he's wrong?
It's a possibility that he's right, and it's a possibility that he's wrong.
So you can't say one way or the other whether President Trump is right about the 2020 election being stolen?
For sure, no, I can't say that.
Are you a member of a group called the U.S. Election Integrity Plan, founded in Colorado in November 2020?
No, I am not.
Were you ever a member of that group?
No, I was not.
You were never affiliated with that group?
They put me on their chat room because we were all traveling to the Capitol, and I wanted to go on a caravan, and I asked if they knew somebody that, just to share a ride.
So you don't share that group's views that the 2020 election was stolen?
I don't know what all their views are. I don't know.
You were just part of their chat because they added you?
They added me because I testified to the Colorado House of Representatives, and they had asked me to join their chat, and especially when I told them that I was going to see my brother at the Capitol, and I kind of just wanted some company.
I don't mean to interrupt the process now, but I guess it's good because there's no background. Representative Buck said he would be available again at 4 o'clock our time, although it has to be pretty quick, so my apologies, but I wanted to bring the notice.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk about your experience on January 6th. So you traveled from Colorado to D.C. for the rally on the Ellipse on the 6th, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And you drove from Colorado to D.C., is that right?
I drove a big pickup truck on a giant trailer. Yep.
That's about a 1,800-mile drive, isn't it?
It's a long drive, yeah.
24, 25 hours, is that what you testified?
Yeah, that's about right, 25, maybe 26 hours. It was a long drive.
And you've never been to D.C. before?
Never.
So let's talk about the Ellipse rally. It's fair to say that there were thousands of people there?
Hundreds of thousands.
So you actually testified there were 350,000 people there?
Just a guess. Yeah.
Okay, that's just a guess, though. That was just your... Okay. You had no way of knowing why each one of those thousands of people were at the Ellipse rally, did you?
No, I wouldn't have any way of knowing. I mean, I assume he asked them to show up to his last speech, and that's why they were there. That's why I was there.
Okay. And you had no way of knowing what each one of those thousands of people were doing throughout the day, did you?
Of course not.
And by the same token, you had no way of knowing what each person at the Capitol building was doing throughout the day on January 6th, did you?
No, I wouldn't know. Yeah, I certainly didn't have an insight into everybody.
And you didn't know why each person was at the Capitol building that day?
Right, I imagine that they're on a spectrum.
Now, you testified that the crowd you saw at the Ellipse rally was joyful and happy, is that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you know that the Secret Service confiscated hundreds of weapons from rally attendees who passed through security at the Ellipse rally?
I did not know that, no.
Let me show you some findings from the January 6th Select Committee on this point. If you could pull up P78 finding 107. Do you see that on your screen?
Mm-hmm.
And so this shows that the confiscated weapons include 242 canisters of pepper spray. You see that?
Oh, I see.
269 knives or blades. You see that?
Yeah.
18 brass knuckles. 18 tasers. See that?
Yeah.
30 batons or blunt instruments. You see that? 17 miscellaneous items like scissors, needles, or screwdrivers. You see that?
Sure.
You know, members of the crowd were wearing tactical gear like ballistic helmets, body armor, military grade backpacks.
I saw that, sure.
So you saw that. That's consistent with your memory of the events.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any reason to dispute these? You have no knowledge to dispute these figures here.
I don't have any knowledge of what they confiscated. I wasn't part of their confiscation effort.
Does that seem like these seem like the items that people bring to a rally that's joyful and happy?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially when in light of the other rallies that I've seen in Seattle and other rallies that they went to support Donald Trump, and they were violently attacked, and some people were murdered. And so, yeah, I think that most people were concerned about the violence that were perpetrated on people just because they supported Donald J. Trump.
All right. I want to show you some of the crowd's reactions to President Trump's rally at the Ellipse. Let's pull up Exhibit 166. Mr. Bjorklund, did you hear the members of the crowd yell, storm the Capitol, invade the Capitol building, take the Capitol?
I didn't hear anybody say take the Capitol.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bjorklund, my question was in the video that I just played. Did you hear that?
Yes, I heard that in the video.
But your testimony is you didn't hear that when you were at the Ellipse rally.
No, I was by the Washington Monument. I wasn't probably near that far down. Definitely not that close.
But you agree that the image here appears to be from the Ellipse rally on the 6th?
Yeah, it appears to be. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, does this look like does a joyful crowd talk about storming the Capitol, taking the Capitol, invading the Capitol building? Is that joyful and happy?
I don't know.
Okay. So let's take a look at some of the videos and photos that you've provided in this case and that we went over. If we could pull up Exhibit 1007, which has already been admitted, and go ahead and play. All right, you can stop the video right there. So, Mr. Bjorklund, this is after President Trump's speech, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And you watched President Trump's whole speech? You stayed till the end?
No, not quite.
Okay. So, would you say this is after 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. And the video shows folks walking away from the Ellipse, away from the Washington Monument, towards the Capitol building. Is that right?
Down the hall. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you did, too, right? You were at the Ellipse, and then you walked towards the Capitol building.
That is correct.
Okay. Let's pull up Exhibit 1010, which has been previously admitted. All right, let's stop the video. So, Mr. Bjorklund, did you hear the man say Pence defies Trump in the video?
Actually, no, I didn't hear that part. I heard the other part.
Can we pull it back to the 25-second mark? All right, stop. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is after 1 o'clock. Like, this is probably 1:10, 1:15, right? Because this is after the previous video that we had seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, so the man says Pence defies Trump. Can you continue playing the video?
I hate Pence.
Okay, stop. So the man said, Pence defies Trump, I hate Pence. Is that right?
Yeah.
And are you aware that Vice President Pence had announced by this point that he would not delay or overturn the election results as the president had urged him to do at that point?
Yeah, it's possible. There were people that had radio, like AM radios and stuff, and they were playing just what was going on. People were commenting about, like, Lauren Boebert speaking or, different people. But I don't have any direct knowledge of that.
Understood. So let's pull up Exhibit 1018, which was previously admitted. And I just want to quickly confirm, that man is holding a pitchfork in the picture, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's pull up Exhibit 1015. And let's just pause it right there. So this is another video that you recorded on the Capitol grounds, is that right?
Yes.
And this is the east side of the Capitol building, is that what you previously testified?
I'm sorry, I don't. Let me think about the map for a second. It's on the front side of the Capitol. I don't know if that's east or west, or I don't really know.
Let me ask you, is it the same side that faces the Washington Monument, or is it the other side?
It's the other side.
Other side, okay.
I thought it was the back, because I went through the front, because it was the most prominent pictures I know. I thought that was the front, and this turns out to be the front of the Capitol.
And so I will represent to you that the video files you produced, some of them had digital timestamps on them, and this video said it was from 12:23 Mountain Time, 2:23 Eastern Time. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Okay. So you had said that you had been exposed to tear gas and you had seen flashbangs when you were at the Capitol. Is that right?
Yes, I saw tear gas, I coughed a little bit, so I seen the tear gas, and there were flashbangs, and that was on the other side of the Capitol with all the bleachers.
How much earlier did that occur in relation to this video? How much longer before this video were you exposed to the tear gas?
I'm going to guess like 30 minutes.
Okay, so after there were flashbangs and tear gas deployed, you continued to stay at the Capitol grounds. You didn't leave.
I didn't go where the police didn't want us.
Okay. And so looking at the video, do you see the crowd bunching up on the stairs there in front of the Capitol building?
Yeah, it looks like they're getting ready to take a big picture.
Are you aware that the doors at the top of those stairs were breached by the mob just 1 minute after this video was shot at 2:24 p.m.?
No knowledge of that whatsoever.
Let's pull up Exhibit 23, page 682. This is a finding from the January 6th report. Do you see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you have no reason to dispute that finding?
I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge to dispute it if I wanted to.
Understood. Okay, and let's go back to the video, 10:15, and let's play the video. And let's pause the video. Did you hear the people chanting "Our House"?
Yes, I did.
Did you hear people chant that throughout the day?
Down there at the Capitol, I heard people chanting that, yes.
Okay. And you had testified earlier that you didn't go inside because you understood the police didn't want you to go inside. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I saw those metal detectors and the people smashing windows, obviously I didn't want to be part of that.
And so again, this was from 2:23 p.m. Are you aware that at 2:28 p.m., about 5 minutes later, the mob reached the police line on the west side of the Capitol?
Describe the west side of the Capitol.
On the opposite side of the building from where you were.
Oh, that's the west. I didn't have any clue. I wasn't anywhere near that. I don't have any knowledge of that.
And Mr. Bjorklund, you testified that the crowd that day, at least the ones you observed, respect law enforcement. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you some body camera video from a police officer that's already in evidence. If you could please pull up Exhibit 15.
Your Honor, I apologize for interrupting. It's about 3 minutes to 4. Could we pause this just for a second so Representative Buck can finish? And again, I apologize. I'm not trying to break up your class.
I told Congressman Buck that we would work with the schedule.
Understood.
And I apologize to you, Mr. Bjorklund. Would you mind just waiting out in the hall until we finish up with Congressman Buck? I think, what are we looking at, like 10 minutes probably?
For me? For Buck.
3 or 4 minutes from us, I'm Director Honor.
Mr. Nicolay, how long do you think we have with Mr. Buck?
Your Honor, I don't foresee more than 5 minutes.
Okay, so Mr. Bjorklund will probably call you back in maybe 10, 15 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation.
Your Honor, I just received a message. He'll be on in 2 minutes.
Sorry. Mr. Sutz, do you have a kind of estimate of how much longer you have with
I'd say
Mr. Bjorklund?
5 to 10 minutes at the absolute most.
Okay.
Change the picture so I can see that it is bigger. Just
I'm going to drive back.
Okay.
I could have fixed it for
We can do that before. That's good enough, thanks.
As soon as you're ready, Your Honor.
Welcome back, Congressman Buck. You're still under oath. You sounded a little bit soft, so speak up.
Will do.
Perfect.
Well, that's one more hour down, Congressman. I'll be very brief. Before, when you were testifying during your direct examination, you said the mob meant to disturb a proceeding. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
And what proceeding was that?
It was the electoral vote count on the House, or on the floor. In the Capitol.
And you repeated that again yesterday. In fact, you said, I think going to the courts is one thing. Trying to move the mob from the mall up to the House floor and interrupting the congressional proceedings, whole different issue. Do you remember saying that yesterday?
Yeah, I said that in relation to some of the members of Congress sending out social media messages to that regard.
I'm sorry, I'm referring to an interview you gave yesterday with Andrea Mitchell. You said that you were referring to that as talking about members of Congress?
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I don't remember you actually saying that, so I would like to, if you don't mind, Your Honor, if you would bring up P311 and start from 115 to 250. Or actually, you can start with, I think, 234. Well, maybe start with 115 to 250.
Your Honor, I would object to this. This is a different video than the one we saw earlier. Again, well outside the bounds of the right. well outside of the bounds of what Representative Buck has discussed, and I'll incorporate my further objection, John.
Response?
This is being offered for impeachment purposes, Your Honor. He just testified he was saying it about congressional members, and I think that this video will show that it was not.
Well, but I know, but I think the objections really had the questions about the premise, which is outside the scope.
Sure, but, well, I think very clearly he just said that he remembered saying during his direct it was meant to disturb a proceeding, and the quote is regarding interrupting the congressional proceedings. I think that it goes directly to what he said during his direct examination, and it goes to directly what he was brought here to talk about originally, which was what happened on January 6th.
Your Honor,
Let me read what his testimony, the questions in his testimony was. So he's already testified that the mob he was referring to was the mob that tried to disturb the electoral count vote on the floor in the Capitol building. And then you said this whole thing about the mob before. So I'm missing the connection here.
Well, I think the important part is that they're interrupting the congressional proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he just said in answer to that, when I was asking about the content, the context, he said, well, he was talking about, and maybe I can clarify with him, I thought he said he was talking about, well, congressional members, or...
If I may, Your Honor, the fact that Representative Buck has testified to is that members from the outside, referred to as a mob, interrupted the proceedings. If Mr. Nicholas wants to try and impeach that point to prove that, in fact, members of the mob did not, which I don't think he wants to do.
And I know you're trying to get him now to say that he blames President Trump for that, or he said that in the initial report, and I already said that was beyond the scope.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. That was a different interview that he gave. That was with Jake Tapper. I'm not trying to introduce that. This is another interview. But my understanding was he was talking about congressional members. Like, if he is testifying that it was the members of the mob were from outside, and they were trying to interrupt the congressional proceedings, then if that's accurate, then...
That's certainly what I understand. Is that your testimony, Congressman Buck, that the mob were members of the outside that were trying to disturb the electoral count?
Yes, Your Honor, it was non-members that were trying to come into the Capitol building to disturb the electoral count.
Okay. If that's what he testified to, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. We short-circuited something, huh?
That's great.
Congressman Buck, I will try to be mercifully brief. You were asked and answered about trust in the process, and you said you trusted judges, you trusted juries, you trusted the judicial process. Do you remember testifying to that?
That may have been one of the videos that was played, but yes, I do trust those institutions to serve the truth.
And why do you trust them?
Because I think that's the system of justice that I participated in for 25 years as a prosecutor, and before that as a lawyer, and after that as a lawyer. I believe we have an adversarial system set up in the courts that does in fact search for the truth. There were times where I didn't necessarily agree with some of the motions to suppress and rulings on those motions, but I certainly felt like the defendant's rights were protected, and we were on the search for the truth.
Does that trust also apply to Congress?
No. The congressional proceedings are political, and they are not a search for the truth. They are a search to promote different political views. The members who are chosen for the committees are chosen because they raised a certain amount of money, because they have engaged in political activities that have been beneficial to the speaker or to the leader, and the process is not in any way similar to what happens in the courts.
And does your trust apply to the January 6th committee?
I think in the case of the January 6th committee, it is not only a political committee, but it also is a political committee that is lacking the viewpoint of those that did not believe that President Trump committed an impeachment offense on January 6th.
Thank you, Representative Buck. Thank you very much for your time today, and we appreciate you interrupting your schedule. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any questions from the Republican Party?
No questions, Your Honor.
No questions for the Secretary.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony, Congressman Buck. You are released.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Let's let's start back up at 4:20, and hopefully we'll still be done well in advance of 5. Seated. Mr. Bjorklund, you're so true.
Thank you.
Ready to proceed, Your Honor? Mr. Bjorklund, we watched a video of you outside of the Capitol at 2:23 p.m. Do you recall watching that video?
Yeah.
And then I told you that 5 minutes later, the police line on the other side of the Capitol building was breached by violent rioters. Did you hear me say that?
Yeah.
breached by violent rioters. Yes. Yes. So, you also said that January 6th wasn't an insurrection. Is that right?
Exactly.
And you think Antifa did it?
There was no insurrection.
So you think Antifa is responsible for attacking more than 140 law enforcement officers at the Capitol on January 6th?
When I was in high school,
It's a yes or no question, Mr.
I
Bjorklund.
read a lot of Louis Moore, and he talked about crowds, and that it's very easy to turn a crowd who has some anger issues and turn them. And
Okay, so Mr.
I
Bjorklund.
believe it was like somebody with a rifle.
Mr. Bjorklund, you testified earlier that the crowd around you respected law enforcement. Is that right?
The ones around me did, yeah.
All right, let's play the video. All right, let's stop the video right there. Let's pause the video right there. Is that man Antifa?
I have no idea who that man is.
All right, keep playing the video. All right, let's pause the video. That man who just attacked a police officer, was that Antifa?
I have no idea who that is.
Is that respect for law enforcement?
He seems angry.
I'm going to show you another video. Could we pull up admitted exhibit 20? Pause the video. Is that respect for law enforcement?
Obviously, they weren't respecting their line.
Can you point me out Antifa in that crowd?
I have no idea which ones are and which ones aren't.
Keep playing the video, please. Let's pause the video. Mr. Bjorklund, you see the men attacking the police officers in the video?
Yeah, I saw him hitting the shield.
Is that respect for law enforcement?
No.
Do you see any Antifa in that video?
Possibly.
Please play the video. Mr. Bjorklund, the truth is that none of those people are Antifa. They were a mob sent by Donald Trump to attack the Capitol building. Isn't that true?
Not the instructions I got.
Not the instructions you got? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Donald Trump said to go down and peacefully make your voices heard. That's what I heard.
You see those people with
Clearly they're not doing that.
You see those people with MAGA hats and Trump flags chanting "Stop the Steal," attacking police officers, trying to break into the Capitol building to stop the certification of an election? Why would Antifa do that? Why would Antifa stop a certification of an election? Why would Antifa break into the Capitol building to stop the certification of the election for Joe Biden? Aren't they on Joe Biden's side? Why would they do that?
Because it actually derailed a more intelligent plan. This is obviously not an intelligent plan. And The plan that I understood it was that they were going to challenge electors, they were going to have a legal process.
And then it turned into this, didn't it? Didn't it turn into this?
As mobs can be turned into, people who are angry can be turned into a mob, just like they did at the Denver, Aurora police station, where they chained up and tried and threatened to burn the building down.
Your Honor,
They were not charged with insurrection.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for the witness, but I will move to admit 166, which is a video of the crowd's reaction to President Trump's speech.
Your Honor, I lost track of the various objections and whatnot with respect to this particular one, but we would certainly object. This has not been authenticated or validated by this witness. It's not appropriate, based on this testimony, to introduce this to it.
So, two things, Your Honor. Two witnesses have verified that the scene in that video accurately depicts the ellipse, as those folks, as those witnesses recall them. Mr. Bjorklund and Mr. Van Flein both confirmed that. And Your Honor also allowed in other video of the crowd's reaction to speeches at the ellipse. And so, this video shows the crowd's reaction from a different time period. No, Your Honor. It is. Could you pull up 166, please?
And while I wasn't, I believe certainly also we sought to introduce the videos were made by eyewitnesses or an eyewitness validation.
Is your objection on authentication?
Yes, sir.
Overruled, the exhibit submitted.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Bjorklund, I just have a very brief question. So one of the videos, if we could clear that video, please. Thank you. So one of the videos, if you need me to replay, I will. But in one of the videos, there was someone who said, "I hate Pence." Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And do you know who said that?
Yeah, I believe it was Steve.
And Steve was?
He was the gentleman that traveled with my brother to see Donald Trump.
Okay. About how much time did you spend with Steve on January 6th?
Just at the campground. We had dinner. We went to the barbecue. I probably had about 24 hours maybe.
Okay. During that time, both before and on January 6th, did Steve engage in any violent behavior?
Not at all.
Did he express any violent sentiments to you?
No.
Okay. Did he have any violent viewpoints or that you were aware of at all?
No, he never mentioned anything about doing violence or doing any harm to anyone.
Okay. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any questions from the Colorado Republican Party?
No questions. No questions.
Okay, let's just, you're released, Mr. Bjorklund. Thank you so much for your testimony. Let's just talk schedule for a moment. I know that you have Mr. Delahanty, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I have one more witness, Mr. Delahanty. We're prepared to come on to start tomorrow's proceedings.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out when that should be.
And we don't anticipate him, I hope it's not 2 hours, but I certainly don't think it will be more than 2 hours.
Okay.
Certainly from our direct testimony.
And then, Your Honor, we have Mr. Heafy, who we're planning on for 1 o'clock remotely tomorrow afternoon. And you asked about rebuttal witnesses earlier. I think we may do a direct with Mr. Heafy that will be in part rebuttal given the recent attacks on the January 6th committee report.
Okay, and then what about the Colorado Republican Party? At what point you were planning on calling witnesses?
Your Honor, we don't plan to call witnesses.
Okay, so if we're going to start at 1 with Mr. Heafy, who sounds like will be the last witness, when should we start tomorrow to make sure we get through Mr. Delahanty and have an opportunity for a break?
I think it's probably going to be 8, given your estimate of a direct, given our estimate of a cross.
I'm fine starting at 8, Your Honor. I hope it's not that long, but...
At 8:30?
8:30 is for us to
You a little more civilized?
That would be excellent, yes.
Okay, so we will resume at 8:30 with Professor Delahanty, and then we will do Mr. Heafy at 1, and that sounds like it will conclude the proceedings until closing arguments, which everybody wants to do on the 15th.
Your Honor, Mr. Tierney had said earlier, we will be submitting revised versions of January 6th findings, so we take out ones that you've already said are not admitted. We may take out ones that we rule are admissible, but we don't need. So we'll submit that, and there may be a few minutes, maybe 5 to 6 minutes of video that we can submit as well. I think Mr. Tierney practice that.
Okay. I see, so you're going to offer to admit revised January 6th findings, and then you may want to place a video that hasn't already been played.
Correct.
And the party should also, at some time before the findings of facts, conclusions of law review, should work together to make sure everybody agrees on what exhibits have been admitted. And actually, it would probably be good if you do that before we end on Friday, so that if other exhibits need to be offered, you can get that taken care of.
Yeah, Your Honor, just as a heads up, I've not spoken to petitioners about it, but there was an exchange between President Trump and now President Biden and a moderator during that debate. There was a snippet that we're going to ask them to produce more of that fuller amount of that same video, and perhaps the transcript as well. So I know we're going to be asking to introduce that. We'll check with petitioners about it.
The Proud Boys question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's it? Well, we can take care of all that housekeeping after Mr. Heafy, since I have to disclose it. And then we can also talk about how we're gonna make an actual record in this case so that if it goes to the Colorado Supreme Court, that it exists, which is you're gonna have to do things with all these exhibits, other than just asking to admit them,
Fair enough.
especially the videos.
Fair enough.
Court's very sensitive.